Okay, so let's start, yeah? So today we'll be covering a couple of different ideas in Mavui, and most of them I don't think will require an example because they're pretty straightforward. But the main one that we'll be studying will actually require an example, and that'll be over here at atkafta, which is going to be the kind of, it's used a lot in Pilpul. The others are very simple and pashut. And we have about stamba 2 or 3 more shiurim before we're completed with the main phase of Mavo HaTalmud. I may do like a supplementary thing because after this section, it has certain laws and certain things with regards to the ideas of poskening, like who does this person and this person, who does the halacha go by in Mishnah or Kulam. But that's not like the ikr of the shiur, because those are not. That's how the halacha is determined. That's not so much in the idea of how the Gemara is ticking. But I think I'll go through it. But the main section of Mavo HaTalmud, probably 2 or 3 more shiurim, including this one, probably 3 more. And the last one will be an atkafta shiur, because I'm doing them a little bit out of order, if you can see, because I'm kind of building up towards the atkafta shiur that's going to be at the end, which is kind of like the send-off, and you'll see why it's kind of a send-off when we get to that point. So in the meantime, today we'll begin with the idea of hilchasa. So hilchasa is basically when the Gemara paskins. The Gemara itself says halacha kasot. Hilchasa could be, halacha Rabbi Yochanan, hilchasa gerava. I mean, the Gemara itself paskins. The Gemara itself, in many cases, we have to kind of follow a set of rules in order to understand who's paskening. But when the Gemara itself paskins, that's it. Oftentimes, I just wanted to mention the Medrash will paskin one way, and the Gemara Yerushalmi will paskin another way, and the Gemara Bavli will paskin yet another way. And we have a general rule that when the Medrash which Medrash does occasionally have a halachic opinion up in there, when the Medrash or the Talmud Yerushalmi argues on the Bavli, we go according to the Bavli with regards to Psak Halacha. So Hilchasa Kishayichlekul B'Shum Davar Halacha.
What's the order then? It's Bavli, then Yerushalmi, and then
Medrash. I mean, in terms of usually Bavli and Yerushalmi, but the Medrash doesn't so often show the Baalei Midrashim are not usually focused so much on halacha, although there is Medrash halacha like Sifra and Sifri, which are basically almost entirely darshaning halachas from Pesukim. However, that's Sifra and Sifri. Medrash halacha is a relatively small portion of Medrash in comparison to Medrash Agada and Medrash Messiah, which are the larger portions. Medrash Agada is the stories of Medrash Messiah. The stories we're darshaning them out from Pesukim. In Medrash Agada, I'll explain more about this when we go over the klal from Agadata. But we'll get into that more. But the main difference between Medrash Agada and Medrash Messiah is that Medrash Agada needs a hint in the pasuk. If there isn't a hint to it in the pasuk, then it's a problem. Medrash Messiah doesn't need a hint in a pasuk. It's just how we have it passed down from generation to generation, until it reached those who wrote it down. and that's called Medrash Mesorah, even though it was a tradition coming from Moshe at Har Sinai. That's how it happened. So, Hilchasa, when you have a machlekes amarayim, or even a machlekes tanaim in Mishnah, or in a Beraisa or Tosefta, which we see all the time, then the Gemara will paskin. It'll say Hilchasa kach v'kach, Hilchasa k'Rabbi Meir, Hilchasa k'Reish Lakish, Hilchasa k'Rabbi Yochanan. And that it's very. This is why I said it's pashut, because almost wherever you see it, it's almost always it's very simple. This is the Gemara's paskening. This is the halacha, and I mean it's that way all throughout Shas. There are kind of strange. I mean, if you remember when we were doing Tuvta, Rava on Daf Chaf Daled in Sechta Brachos says atkafta itmar tufta de Shmuel, even though we said that there's a rejection of Shmuel's opinion, afal pikein halacha k'maisa, that nevertheless the halacha goes hilchas k'maisa, kavase I think it says, that the halacha goes according to him, and that actually is this klal hilchasa. That even if the Gemara it doesn't necessarily follow the exact pilpul of the Gemara, nevertheless the Gemara will paskin halacha l'maisa. And when it says hilchasa, that's kind of paskening halacha l'maisa. Now these two are interesting technical groupings of the Gemara, not so much as a particular calling, but groupings. A sugya is the Kriyas Gemara of Blainer. This is essentially an entire section of the Gemara that deals with a particular inyan. So from the beginning of the Gemara to the end of the Gemara of a particular Gemara that deals with a particular inyan, then it's a certain that which we deal with that inyan, that's called a sugya. So if you remember when we were covering Meisvei and Tuvta, we learned a section of Gemara in Masechta Tamura that began on Daf Daled Amud Beis and continued until Daf Vav. That was called regarding the Kol Milsa Damira Chamana Lusavinim Avid Mahanya, the Machlekes Abaye Rava of whether or not if a person does something that the Torah says not to do, that it has an effect. Yeah. That entire section that discusses this inyan and goes through this, along with his Sha'alesim Shavosav, it's Shak Limitari, it's back and forth, Masu Matan, that is called a sugya. And so too, like if you remember, we learned this bit when we were learning the klal of Urminhu, of Ramya up here. We learned from the bottom of Tes Amud Beis in Beitza to the middle of Yud Amud Aleph, which discussed that was the idea of Skabe Simchas Yom Tov. And actually, you and I we learned this yesterday as well. We reviewed it yesterday, and that section, which begins with the diuk Alma Gabe Simchas Yom Tov, Beis Hillel L'Kul, Beis Shamil L'Chumra, that Beis Shamil L'Chumra, Beis Hillel L'Kula, that section until the end with the inami that Rashi doesn't have, and Rashi and Tesus doesn't have, where Rabbi Yochanan at the end says Avraham Rabbi Yochanan Machlef is a shita. That section, that's also called the sugya. Meaning it's when the Gemara is dealing with a particular inyan, that's called a sugya. Shmais has a smaller division. When an Amora or a Tana says it says a davar halacha, he says something, he gives us his opinion in something. Okay, so when an Amora or a Tana says something in Davar Halacha, they tell us their opinion essentially, whether it would be the according to. They're expressing their opinion and it's specifically in the Davar Halacha. So we'll say, an example of a Shmaisa would be, for instance, we said that Rav and Itmar, yeah? Rav says that Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov Rishon Aser B'Sheni, yeah? And Rabbi Yochanan said Nolda B'Rishon Mutta B'Sheni. The specific opinion that this memra of Rav says Aser B'Rishon Aser B'Sheni, Nolda B'Rishon Aser B'Sheni, and Rabbi Yochanan says Mutta B'Rishon Nolda B'Rishon Mutta B'Sheni. That is within Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheni. That's called the Shmaisa, and that would be this klal here. Shmaisa hi shem kol halacha shetavo v'inyan Torah v'lo b'davar acher. So it's something that's coming to give you a hora, not a story. Story doesn't follow necessarily into a Shmaisa, so that's a different klal altogether. But it's dealing with a more specific statement in halacha. Not to say that the person's opinion that's psak halacha, but this is the certain opinion, the certain saying of that person, or of Motava Amarayim, and that's what we're going to hear as a Shmaita. Later on, we're going to see a couple of other ones that are very similar. When it says the Mavo's idea, which is called shita, is very similar, as is. Shita seems very similar, but there's a couple of key differences that we're going to go over probably next time. Next week, by the way, I don't think we're going to have a class because it's Parents' Weekend, and so there's going to be the parents here. And I personally am going to be spending time Isaac in the mitzvah from Kibbutz of the Aim. And so I expect also that other people in the yeshiva should also be Isaac in such a mitzvah when they have the chance to be, since they spend so much time away from home. So now we'll cover in brief the idea of atkafta. So atkafta means an attack. That's the idea. It means an attack. So, atkafta is a certain type of kushya, which is asked not from a beraisa or a mishnah. We talked about kushya as being asked from a meisvei, as being asked from a beraisa or a mishnah, and urminhu is also being asked from a beraisa or a mishnah. But this is a person challenging it from his own logic. An amora is challenging the opinion of another amora from his own logic. What's the nafkamina? You basically have two Amoraim, and instead of the other Amora doesn't necessarily need to answer on it. He usually does, but if you're going to give me a kasha on my opinion, how's my opinion any better than your opinion? We're both Amoraim. It's not something that he's forced to. You're not going to have his opinion be completely rejected necessarily. Many times it will be, but not necessarily, because it's between two Amoraim and not an Amora and a Tana, which is in the case of Urminhu or not Urminhu. In the case of Meisvei, of a Stam Kushya, where we're coming down on them with a Beraisa, a Tana Beraisa, or a Tosefta, or a Mishnah. Now, if you're challenging from logic, it could mean a couple of possible things. It could mean, number one, that there is a fundamental problem with the person's opinion, which we're going to see actually in the Gemara in Makos that we're going to be going over today. The Gemara actually rejects the first person's opinion. It had the maskif on it, because the person who made the maskif, who made the atkafta, had a really strong point that he made. So essentially, atkafta, while it means an attack, it doesn't mean an attack on the person, God forbid. It means a logical jab, if you will, at the logical argument that the person is making. Because we don't do attacks on people in Yiddishkeit. Thank you very much. Das ist nicht die jiddische Sache. Yeah? So, atkafta hu me'inyan akushya. It's similar to akushya, but instead of with Tanaim, it's Amoraim. V'hi la'amoraim. It's only with the Amoraim. V'heim achreinim, and even among the Amoraim, it's mostly going to be later Amoraim discussing this. You won't necessarily so often hear Maskiv Rav or Maskiv Rav Yechanan. It'll be usually, for the most part, Rav Papa, Abaya, Rava, sometimes Rab and Rav Yosef, oftentimes also Rab and Rav Yosef. For sure, Ravashi you hear from all the time, Maskif Ravashi, or Ravina, and actually the Maskif we'll be going over today is a Maskif from Ravina. And the Simana Maskif La Rav Pliny. The Siman is Maskif like this. Mem Sav Kuf Yud Fe Sufit. And what you're going to be seeing is you'll see this all over Shas, and it's used often in Pilpul. It signifies that there's a logical difficulty, or it could also signify, as I've seen in a couple different places, where the person who's making the maskif may not necessarily understand exactly the depth and clarity of the original opinion, which I've seen once or twice, where the Amora has responded to a maskif as, "Don't you think I've thought about?" Basically, "Don't you think I've thought about that?" And I'll give you an answer as to how I've already considered that. So the halacha bezat and the halacha in this, where we're going to go according to this, it's very similar to Meisvei and Isvei. So just like with a kushya, with a normal kushya asking from a beraisa, the halacha goes according to the answer. If the rabbi can answer, if the Amora can answer on what the other Amora asked him, then we're good. If he can't answer, then we might have a problem. Okay, so we're gonna jump in. I know this is looking like it's a much shorter shiur, which is fine because you guys have to go on Mivsoyim, and it makes it easier to get things done a little. I mean, it's better. It's okay for it to be a 45-minute or 35-minute shiur. That's fine. Since are you following?
Yeah, I like that. Even though there's one person, you're acting as if there are many people.
It's my job to treat every student as if even if there's one student, that they should be as if they're the entire class. We should know this is. And also, maybe there are students who are not here, who also may be going with you on Mivsoyim, and you may be determining when they're going to leave, and I understand that you also have things to do before Mivsoyim. Let's see, where are we going here? Alright, so this is from Masechta Makos, which the opening chapter of Masechta Makos deals with. It deals with the idea of false edus, of false witnesses, and this particular case, a special category of false witnesses called Eidim Zaymimin. Zaymimin means Hazama means planning. That they plotted, they planned out to try and cause this other person a loss. And I want to quickly go over the Mishnah before I jump right into the Gemara, or I should say, I want to quickly go over the part of the Mishnah that we're going to be looking at. So only the first part, technically, of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah asks, "Keitzad ha'edim naisim zayimim?" How do edim become zayimim? So actually, there's an interesting discussion in the Gemara about the lashon of the Mishnah. That's to go into another time. Since I'm not going to be focusing on that, I'm going to be jumping actually down here to our main example here, where starting with the opinion of Bar here. She says, Bar Pada Omer. That's where we're going to be starting in the Gemara. Anyway, Me'edim Ranabi Yishpayni. So two witnesses come into court and they say, we give testimony that this guy, this other Kohen, with these two witnesses are Kohanim, and this other guy is a Kohen. Yeah? We give witnesses that this Kohen is a Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza. His mother was divorced, and she then married a Kohen, which is forbidden by the Torah, or she was a Chalutza, of which there's no English translation, but as opposed to the Yavama Chalutza,
spit on her shoe.
Yeah, the removing of the shoe. We're actually makish, and we learn out Chalutza from Gerusha. So we compare Chalitza to Gerushin, compare Chalitza to divorce, and so the Chalutza is also in the category of the same as a divorcee. So not allowed to marry a Kohen. And in this particular case, if he had become, that's called a chalal, and a chalal, which means a profaned Kohen, because his father did something that wasn't quite hagain, and so he was born out of a forbidden marriage, and because he was born out of a forbidden marriage, so then there's a little problem. And what's the little problem? That he's no longer allowed to do the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. He's not allowed to serve in the temple and to do the avodas of the sacrifices, the work of the sacrifices, and else that's needed. And so in this particular case, a Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza, so they want to make him a chalal. They want to puzzle him from avodah. They want to disqualify him from serving in the temple. And by the way, not just him. If he becomes a chalal, so do all of his kids until the end of time. So they want to puzzle not just him, but all of his kids. Ein Aimrim, we don't say Ye'aseh Zeh Ben Gerusha Ben Chalutza Tachta. That usually the case of Eidim Zaymimin is that we make we do to the Eidim, to the witnesses, what they planned to do to the defendant. So if that means that if they planned to get him lashes, then they have to get lashes. If they plan to get him killed, they get killed. If they plan to get him to have to pay 1,000 zuz, they have to pay 1,000 zuz to him. I mean, it's basically what they planned goes back on them. But in these two cases, in our Mishnah here, this one and the next one as well, that they are instead of being made their instead of have it being done to them what they plan to do, so they're actually just given lashes, because there's this kind of tough case, and we learned this out in the Gemara actually in a couple of different for the reason for why we come across that. the Torah itself excludes these cases. So we don't make him a ben gerusha ben these edim. We don't make the edim ben gerusha ben chalutza tafta in his place. Al loka rhyme, but they're given 40 lashes. So we're gonna jump now and talk a little bit about how we came to that conclusion. So over here, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says in the name of Rabbi, he's this we do and don't have in our Girsa. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Reish Lakish, whatever, says that the reason why we can't make him, we can't make the Edim a ben Gerush or ben Chalutza. The reason why we can't make him a ben Gerush or ben Chalutza is because the pasuk said, "Va'asisim lo kasher zamam." We do to him as he planned. What did he plan? He planned to puzzle him, the Kohen, and all of his children until the end of time. But we can't do that to him. We can't do that to the witness. Why? Because as asisim loy kasher zaman, you can do it to him, but you can't do it to his children. The whole idea of kasher zaman is every detail that you plan to do this to this person also needs to go by you. And the Torah says by asisim loy, do to him like he planned, velo lezaro, not to his children. So we can't puzzle the children of the witnesses because the witnesses wanted to puzzle the children of this guy. We can't do that because the pasuk says lo, meaning to him, not to his children, but to him, to the witness, not to the witness's children. So then the Gemara asks leif saluhu ledidei velo leif lezarning. Maybe you should puzzle him from avoda, the witness, and not puzzle his kids. And for the Gemara, ba'inin kasher zamum lases v'leika. We need to do to him everything. We can't split up. We can't split up. Either it's all or nothing. Either we do to him everything that he planned to do to this other guy, or we don't do anything and we give him 40 lashes. And in this particular case, since we can't do everything, we can't punish his kids for what he did here. We can't, the Torah says, you have to do to him, not to his kids. So then, since it's not, we can't do everything, we can't puzzle his kids from Kuhuna, only puzzle him from Kuhuna. Therefore, since we can't do everything, we give him 40 lashes instead. Now, this is where we begin the issue with the atkafta, because that was the good opinion. That's what's going to be accepted in the end. I just wanted to cover the accepted opinion before I moved on to what's going to be rejected. Because in the end of the rejected thing, it says Ella keda'am reish lakish, and it's because the Gemara is going to conclude that this was good. Barpada Barpada disagrees, and he says kal v'chayim. He says I can learn it from a logical standpoint. I don't need a pasuk. Oh, you know what happens when a person says they don't need a pasuk? Then we're in trouble. Torah says. So you say you don't need a pasuk? Now we're in trouble. Barpada Eimer kal v'chaymer. I can learn a kal v'chaymer. Yeah, ma hamechalal enu mischalal. For a kohen to become pasul, they have to be a ben gerusha ben chalutza. The kohen who married. The Kohen who married the woman that he was not allowed to marry, he doesn't become pasul from avoda. Technically, if he did tshuva or whatever, if he did tshuva, he divorced her and did tshuva, then he's good for avoda. Again, he doesn't. Ma hamechalo, einu mischalo. If the person who brings children in or halalim himself doesn't become a halal. Habal lit v'chilul, a person who tries to make someone else a halal, v'lo chilul, and does not succeed in doing it, ein udin shelo yischalo. And how much more so is it should he not be made into a challah? So we have a problem with this. Why? Because we're saying he planned to be he planned to make his friend a challah. So why shouldn't he be made a challah? Oh, because because the person who actually made a challah, the person who actually made kids who's a challah doesn't become a challah himself. Why doesn't that work? Because if he planned to do it, it should be done to him by the whole concept of Edom Zaimim is that he didn't succeed in doing it, right? In order for it to be Edom Zaimim, he can't have succeeded to do it. So here for Bar Pada, we're forgetting this reason entirely. He's starting from scratch and trying to give a reason for why the Gemara says Ein Yasa Zebin Gerusha Ben Chumutz Atkafta. So his reason is because if the person who really makes chalalim, who gets in a forbidden relationship and has children, the children are chalalim, just as he doesn't become a chalal, the person who goes to try and make someone a chalal but doesn't succeed, how much more so should he not become a chalal?
I see.
So since he planned to do it and he didn't succeed, how much more so should he not? Himself shouldn't become. Guess what? Maskif lo Ravina. Ravina rejects this from a logical standpoint. He says we have a problem. Why? Imkain batelet tires Edom Zaimim. Totally, you have uprooted the idea of Edom Zaimim. The whole idea of Edom Zaimim is if he planned to do it but didn't succeed, he gets it done to him. Because he didn't succeed, he gets it done to him. So you're going to say that since he didn't succeed, how much more so should he not be done to him? Where's Edom Zaimim? And you lost the whole concept of Edom Zaimim. So the
I don't understand the conclusion.
The conclusion isn't finished yet.
Part.
Okay, so the maskif, what happened here? Whoops. Okay, so what happened with the maskif is that you remember how I explained. I taught you the problem with the kal v'chomer. The problem with the kal v'chomer was that. Yeah, the problem with the kal v'chomer was that if the case is that the mechalo, the person who makes profaned kohanim come into the world, him himself doesn't become profaned. Habo l'chalo, so someone who comes to try and make someone, if the one who for sure made chalalim doesn't become a chalal, the person who tried to make someone a chalal but didn't succeed, how much more so should he not become a chalal? He tried to do it and he didn't succeed, and that's the reason why he shouldn't become a chalal. You understand? But he tried to do it and he didn't succeed, and this is what Bar Pada is saying. Since he tried to do it but he didn't succeed, because
he didn't provide sufficient testimony, or
because the idea of Edom Zaimim is that someone else, two other Edom came in, and they said, "How can you testify? You were with us then."
Oh, right.
So they not only could they weren't giving sufficient testimony, they were lying from the outset because they weren't even there. They couldn't have witnessed it because they weren't there.
Right.
So these Edom became Zaimim, and therefore they didn't succeed in making him a chalal. But the whole idea of hazama of Edom Zaimim is that when the other witnesses
received 40 lashes, right?
Yes, but the reason why they received 40 lashes, that's what we're debating. Why can't they become a chalal?
And that their seed should be.
Yeah. Why couldn't they become a chalal?
Because okay, so we tried so the right answer is because the pasuk says.
Because the pasuk says lo zari that's what we decided up here.
But then Bar Pada is trying from homework for logic.
Yeah, Bar Pada is trying to learn it out from a Kal V'chomer, and since Bar Pada is trying to learn it out from a Kal V'chomer, so now it's a logical. He's trying to come up with a logical way of darshaning it out, and if he's coming out of a logical way of darshaning it out and not directly from a pasuk, now there's room for a logical challenge. A maskif is a logical challenge. So what did he say? He said, since he didn't succeed in making him a chalal, therefore he shouldn't become a chalal himself. The whole idea of Eidim Zaymimim is that since he didn't succeed, he came and he gave false testimony, and therefore he didn't succeed. There he has it done to him. So you're saying that because he didn't succeed, he shouldn't have it done to him? That's nullifying the entire idea of Eidim Zaymimim. So that's what Ravina comes to say. Maskif la Ravina. Ravina comes to say, in Cain, if this is the case, if you're saying that since he didn't succeed in profaning this guy, that he shouldn't be profaned himself, that nullifies the entire idea of Eidim Zaymimim. That's if he planned to do it, it gets done to him. In Cain, the Tailus Torah's Eidim Zaymimim. You understand now? Pretty good? Yeah?
Why? No, I don't understand the maskif.
Maskif means...
I know what maskif is, but I just don't understand why...
You understand the problem with the Kal V'chomer? The problem with the Kal V'chomer is that the idea of Eidim Zaymimim is that it's done to him as he planned to do. Not as he actually did, only as he planned to do. So
he planned to have his seeds.
He planned to have this guy and all of his children puzzled from Avodah in the Beis Mikdash. He planned to have every single one of this guy. He wanted to shoot this guy out from the Beis Mikdash. So according to the whole idea of Eidim Zaymimim, the witness, should become a chalal. And Barpada darshaned in such a way, he said, since he didn't succeed in doing it, then he shouldn't become a chalal. But he planned to do it, so he should become a chalal. That's the whole idea of Eidim Zaymimim. So Ravina is coming to point that out. What's the logical problem with Barpada's Kal V'chomer? That it nullifies the idea of Eidim Zaymimim. Don't let the lashon here confuse you. In Cain, V'teil's Torah's Eidim Zaymimim means he was mevatel the idea of Eidim Zaymimim. If it's the case that someone, if they didn't succeed in doing it, that they shouldn't have it done to them, then it completely uproots the idea of Eidim Zaymimim. And actually, Ravina is going to bring to us a funky Kal V'chomer at the beginning of the next page that I think will help us a little bit to understand what he's saying. Okay. So he's saying, so he's giving a very crazy, a very wild example, because he's explaining a very wild, almost a wild example, because he's coming to emphasize exactly how ridiculous the original Kal V'chomer is. And so Rashi is going to explain this to us a little bit. Ma'aseikel einu niskel. If someone who's an Eid Zaymim, but they didn't become an Eid Zaymim until after the guy was put to death, Einu Niskel. The whole Eidim Zomim is Kasher Zamim. Lasishal Kasher Zamim, not Kasher Asa. If it already was done, they can't be. For Eidim Zomim, they can't. They can't get killed. They can get different punishments, which it's talked about later in the 3rd chapter, and also over here at the end of this chapter. But Mavo HaTalmud, just an Eid Zomim who planned and succeeded in getting the guy killed in court, Einu Niskel, he himself doesn't get stoned. Haba Liskel, an Eid Zomim who brought false testimony that this guy was doing something that required being put to death. Someone who testified, for example, someone came and they testified on someone that they were for Avodah Zarah I'll say. For Avodah Zarah, or for, how about Mechal Shabbos. Mechal Shabbos, which is Skila. The person came and said, we were at Shabbos at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 people come. They say, at Shabbos at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we saw this guy starting a fire and cooking his food. And we asked him, do you know it's Shabbos? And he said, yeah, I know it's Shabbos. He says, you know it's Asur on Shabbos to do this? He said, yeah, I know it's Asur on Shabbos. He said, they said to him, you know that the punishment is stoning? He said, yeah, I know the punishment is stoning. And he did it nevertheless. His punishment would theoretically be the death penalty. So they came, the 2 Eidim came and brought this guy to court, and they told this whole Maisa that they talked to this guy at 2 o'clock and whatever. And the court did a Darishan Chakira, and it seemed like their Eidus checked out, and the guy got put to death. Now comes the next day, 2 other people found out about this, and they said, how did this happen? These 2 people, they were with us at Shabbos lunch.
That is so many.
At 2 o'clock, they were with us at Shabbos lunch. How could they have seen this guy being Mechal Shabbos out in the field 3 miles away? So they do get punished, but not with skila. They can't be killed as a result of that at this point. So Mavo HaTalmud, since the person who succeeds to be an aid, a false witness, and succeeds getting a person killed, isn't stoned himself, which is talk of the fact, is that if he succeeds, he isn't stoned. But Lisko, person who comes to try and get someone stoned, in this particular case, we'll say the same story. The Eidim came to the court and they said, we saw this guy on Shabbos at 2 o'clock cooking and making a fire, and we warned him and everything. And then in court, the Gemara Din or whatever, as this machlokes later, then 2 people before this guy's put to death, 2 people come in and they say, you were with us at Shabbos lunch. What are you talking about? You couldn't testify in this. Since they came to make him stoned, to stone him, below Sakel, and they did not succeed to get him stoned, how much more should they not be stoned? They're mamish Eidim Zomim, and since the Eidim Zomim succeeded to get this guy killed, if they're not stoned, the person who didn't succeed, how much more so they shouldn't be stoned? You understand the Kal V'chomer? That was the problem with Bar Pada's Kal V'chomer. Just as the person who for sure did it doesn't get punished in such a way, the person who planned to do it, how much more so he shouldn't get punished. that uproots the entire idea of Eidim Zaimimim from which is Minhan Torah. V'asisa kasher zamim, to do them as he planned, not to do them as he did. So, but rather we should paskin according to, we should conclude according to the original drasha, which was the drasha of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Reish Lakish, where he said about the Vasisa lo do it to him but not to his children. So this is probably the biggest example of maskif that maybe I've come across yet, because he really emphasizes exactly the logical problem with Bar Pada's Kal V'chomer. And just like this kind of issue here, with this logical issue that he wanted, because he's learning from. You remember how I said, if you say you don't need a pasuk, you might run into problems. Right, run into a problem. So Bar Pada thought he didn't need a pasuk, and then he ran into a big problem. What was the big problem he ran into? He ended up being mevatel teres Eidim Zaimim. Got it? So a maskif will end up as a logical challenge, and usually the challenge will come and then it'll emphasize. And here Bar Pada didn't have an answer. There was no good answer, and for this challenge, because Bar Pada had a major pircha on his Kal V'chomer, a major problem on his Kal V'chomer, and so the Gemara concluded that really the first explanation that we originally had was the good explanation. All right. So Be'ezras Hashem, not next week, but the week afterwards, we'll be doing more or less many of the remaining klalim, with the exception of Maisa and Agada. Maisa and Agada will do 3 weeks away. Maisa and Agada will be the final shiur of the main portion of Mavo HaTalmud. Okay, thank you so much for joining us.